Good evening, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the State of the Island Debate Travel and Tourism Special. Following the success of last year's inaugural event, we've gone bigger and better for 2026. Tonight we have a top-tier panel ready to discuss some of the biggest challenges currently facing our island. On behalf of Island Echo and the Isle of Wight Observer, I'd like to thank each of you for giving up your time tonight. And a big thank you goes to you all, our audience. There's several hundred of you here tonight, and even more watching at home through our live streams. This event is being held as part of Indie Newsweek, celebrating independent media across the UK. Both Island Echo and the Isle of Wight Observer are owned and operated locally. We are proud to serve our Isle of Wight community. Mark Morgan-Hughes, Chief Executive of the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, is our chairman for tonight. But before I hand over to him, Reverend Heath Monaghan is here to welcome you all to this wonderful venue.
Thank you. Thank you, Isle of Wight Observer and Island Echo, for choosing what I think is one of the island's most fantastic, newest, oldest venues. We have spent the last few years refurbishing the insides so that it is toasty warm in the winter, cool in the summer. There's a great coffee bar at the back and a state-of-the-art, fantastic sound system and visual system that works. So I look forward to welcoming you all back for a whole host of other things, for theatre and for music within this venue, but also for church. We've got church growing here, multiple congregations for all ages, from tots right through, that is taking place. And we have a real community feel to the All Saints family that operate from here. It is great that you're here. And just want to take 2 seconds of this moment to let you know that we're an outward-looking church and we do a huge amount for the community of working around housing, around doing hospitality and a whole host of things. If you've got any questions about what Ride All Saints is looking to do, either chat with one of our team at the back or look on our website, ride.church. And it now gives me great pleasure to welcome two fantastic people who help to operate the Daisy Bus. Michelle and Chris, come and tell us about the Daisy Bus.
Thank you, Keith. Oh, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much indeed, the Isle of Wight Observer and Island Echo, and for hosting and for allowing us. Dave is our brand new mascot who is at inaugural this evening. Hi, Dave. So it just gives me great pleasure to just spend a few minutes just to say welcome and thank you. And I'm sure a lot of you may have heard of the Daisy Ring Bus. We took over from Wessex Council's Court in August last year, quite hurriedly, and then we took over January the Portsmouth route. We had a little bit of a lead-in time there, which was quite nice. And I'm delighted here to see from here we have got Red Funnel, Fran and Neil, who have been so supportive, as have Whitelink and Hover Travel. So I know you're going to have your discussions this evening, but it's Islanders looking after Islanders, and we couldn't do what we do without them, because they take our voluntary drivers. We've now got 13 voluntary drivers over every day. They bring the buses backwards and forwards when they come in and need repairing. Lovely Chris here looks after them. I'm sure you all know Chris. I'm sure, in one form or another, because he's a very busy man. So we have 5 directors. There's myself, there's Chris, we've got Josh from White's coaches, we have got Sophia from Coloco Marketing, and we've got Colin Hetherington. And we are all volunteers. We don't take a penny, because our aim is to look after patients from the Isle of Wight with cancer, getting them to the QA or Southampton General University hospitals with love and care. And that is exactly what we do. Would you agree, Chris?
Absolutely.
That's exactly what we're about. We will leave some leaflets out for you, because it just shows you it's all about compassion and love for island folk. And volunteer drivers, you may have seen the slides as they're happening. We are indebted to them. We've got Martin here, we've got lovely Rex. Rex oversees all of them. He does the training, the induction, recruiting, and these people give their time freely. And I can tell you what, patients with cancer leaving the island don't have to worry about a thing, because they are met by our drivers and they are loved. And that's the only way I can describe it. From the time they get off the hovercraft or off the Red Jet or off Whitelink, they are taken care of. You would have heard as well the theme song, Lean On Me, which my daughter Anna recorded, and the minute we took over, I knew that that was the right song for us, because it's everything, lean on me. We sometimes all need that little bit extra love and compassion, and you can download it. There's no cost, but you can just download it and listen to it and just know what we're about. Can you think of anything I've left out, Chris?
I think you've done very well, Michelle. Thank you very much.
And nobody's waving. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's great to see so many of you here today. I think generally to know that Island residents are so interested and passionate about the island. Tonight's debate is all about travel and tourism. We've got 5 pre-planned questions before we move to some questions from the floor, and we do have some that have been submitted online as well. So before we get going, I'd like to introduce our panel. First of all, can we thank the panel for coming tonight on a Friday night? I think it's a great opportunity for us to have debate. Face-to-face debate with open questions from the floor is something we rarely see these days, and so I think the six here, especially the non-professional politicians, deserve great credit for that. So if I can introduce them, from the end nearest to me, Councillor Jonathan Bacon. Jonathan has just started his second stint as the leader of the Isle of Wight Council. He's the independent councillor for Brading and St Helens. He was re-elected in 2026, having previously led the council from 2015 to 2017, and his administration is, I quote, focused on restoring confidence, managing financial pressures and taking part in the Hampshire and Solent devolution framework. Next along the table is Dominic Ray. Dominic is the Chief Executive of Visit Isle of Wight. Dominic leads that organisation. It's the island's destination management organisation. It's here to promote tourism on the Isle of Wight. He brings more than a decade of senior leadership across tourism, leisure and attractions, with a focus on collaboration, supporting island businesses and building a stronger year-round visitor economy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later on. Richard Quigley, MP for Isle of Wight West. Richard is the first MP for the Isle of Wight West. It's not difficult though, because the island was split last time, of course. But Richard is, I think, the first Labour MP to sit on the Isle of Wight, and indeed a member of the governing party, which is always interesting. He won the seat at the 2024 general election and serves on the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, raising island issues, including digital poverty, dentistry and cross-Solent transport. I'm sure he does far more than that. So. Then, sat next to Richard, Fran Collins, Chief Executive Officer of Red Funnel. Fran is a respected maritime leader, and if you didn't know, a qualified master mariner and chief engineer, someone who clearly understands the business from the bottom to the top.
Chief engineer, qualified engineer, but not a chief.
Right, okay, thank you, Fran. I'm reading this, Fran. She began her career at sea and became the first female master at Condor Ferries. Since joining Red Funnel in 2018, she has championed sustainability, diversity and UK shipping. To the side, your right of Fran is Joe Robinson, the first MP for Isle of Wight East. A solicitor by profession, Joe's lived and worked on the island for many years, previously served as a local councillor, and Joe's priorities include healthcare, transport, economic growth and giving the island a strong voice in Westminster. And then finally, the new boy in the room, Simon Moon is the Strategic Director of Community Services at the Isle of Wight Council. I think you've been here 4 weeks, is it, Simon?
just a little longer than
Just
that.
a little more than that, yeah. Strategic Director of Community Services, he's a qualified civil engineer, brings more than 28 years of senior leadership across the public and private sectors, including major infrastructure, transport, regeneration and environmental programmes. Simon's here as the man responsible for the road network on the Isle of Wight, so I'm sure Simon will be getting a baptism of fire 4 weeks into his job. So, let's move swiftly on to our 5 questions. And question number 1. Residents have raised concerns about the condition of roads, Simon. Diversion signage and whether long-standing promises made under the Island Roads contract have been delivered. Do you believe the island's infrastructure is meeting expectations and what should happen next? Now, before we bring Simon in, I'm going to actually ask Dominic Ray from Visit Isle of Wight to answer that question first. Dominic has publicly expressed some frustration in the last couple of weeks, so I think that's a pretty good place to start.
Thank you, Mark. There's a number of problems in my mind with the current setup and infrastructure. It's clearly not meeting the needs of businesses or our businesses from my perspective. I think the biggest failure is communication, coordination and planning. Over the last few weeks we've seen people have lots of disruptions to their businesses. We've had multiple road closures all at the same time. I think we all understand that roads need to be closed. It's about when they're closed, how they're closed, and the manner in which they're communicated to businesses isn't up to scratch at the moment, in my opinion.
Simon, do you want to come in next?
So thank you and good evening all, and thank you for inviting me along, which I'm sure is going to be quite a topical debate. As Mark's just introduced, I haven't been here long, but what I have seen, I would concur with Dominic that I don't think, particularly around the issues of roadworks and streetworks, that we're delivering for residents and local communities. I think we're falling short in that aspect. I'd just like to come back and actually explain, because first of all, the island, there are some positives in the sense that, we're unique here in the island and we're having a PFI. There's only 5 of them in the country. And in terms of the road condition, I think that's important to separate out from roadworks. The road condition, the asset here is in very, very good condition. We are probably one of the leading authorities for road condition. I think that's good. Yes, I mean, there is, I'm trying to just paint a picture here that actually there are some positives in terms of, we don't have as many potholes as we do in a lot of local authorities in the mainland. But what I do, that's fact, and that is evidence on that, and I appreciate that residents are not necessarily recognising that, but I do want to point that part out. What I am clear on, in terms of responding to this, that the issue around managing roadworks isn't good enough. That's not being managed effectively and does need to be improved. And I'm not going to sit here as someone that has come to the island in the last couple of months and has witnessed, and I do use public transport here on the island, and I have seen what's going on. I don't think it's acceptable, and that's something that I've got to address. And I think, to be transparent, coming here today is important for me coming into this role, so I can listen to your concerns and issues. And I think my commitment to you is that I am prepared to go away and try and make a difference to improve that for you, because it hasn't, even what I've witnessed, hasn't been where it needs to be. But I do want to try and sort of recognise that there are some good things happening with the way that that contract is being delivered. And we have to recognise that some of our network is in very, very good condition. There was a recent report in the spring that where the Isle of Wight is listed in the top 5 authorities in the country for road asset condition. Roadworks is a very different matter altogether, and I think that's something that we are not doing as well at. So I think in terms of the question, we're not delivering. I'm accepting that, and I think it's important that coming into this role, and I recognise I'm new, I am going out, I am listening to residents, I will listen to different stakeholders and partners across the island to try and understand what those challenges are and make a real attempt to try and improve that. So, Dominic's had the opportunity to respond in that in the first instance, and I certainly do recognise what he's saying, and I'm more than committed to working with Dominic and the tourism community on the island to try and address that for his members' concerns. But that goes to residents and other partners on the island in trying to make an improving situation to what you're experiencing at the moment.
Thanks, Simon. Richard, is your postbag full of complaints about Newport Road?
I mean, the Horsebridge Hill development, you think I'd threaten to take out someone's grant and do something bad to them. I mean, it doesn't really matter what I think about the condition of the roads, because I'm just one person. I might be the MP, but I'm just one person. So, show of hands who does think the infrastructure is doing what it needs to do. Anybody that thinks it is, put your hand up. Anybody that isn't, put your hand up. Okay, so I mean, perception is reality, unfortunately, and that's become my new world over the last 2 years being a politician. I think the problem with it is I mean, Simon, to be fair to Simon, we are in the top 5 of condition of roads in the country. Now everything's relative. So, I don't expect anyone to start cheering at that.
That's because all the other roads are really bad.
You're not wrong, sir. There is an adage that if somebody's digging something up, something good's happening, unless it's a graveyard. But I think the problem really is around the fundamental relationship with council and island roads for me, and Jonathan might expand on this, is that island roads really do need to set themselves out as a champion of the island. And it doesn't feel, when I deal with them, it doesn't feel like they are, and I'm sure you've all had dealings with them. Now they do some really good things, fix my street, if you've never used it, go on there, make sure you use it lots and lots and lots, because it's really, really good. But they need to have much better engagement with business and residents, and that, unfortunately, Simon, is going to be your biggest challenge.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, you've heard the officer, the senior officer, tell us he doesn't think it's good enough. Has he got the backing of the members and the leader?
Absolutely, 100%. I think I'd agree with pretty much everything that's been said so far. There is some good stuff out there, but I don't think anyone can really see it for all the bad stuff. I think the relationship, the Isle of Wight Council is at the end of the day the Highways Authority. Island Roads is the contractor, and so the responsibility rests at the end of the day with the Isle of Wight Council, and something needs to be improved drastically. The relationship between the two parties, at certain key points in the last 13 years, whatever it is, things that should have been done have not been done. I don't think the balance that should be there in that relationship is present. So I think the key points which Dominic has highlighted, there's not clear, good forward planning. That needs to be addressed, and Simon and I have spoken that's a priority. There's not good enough engagement between all the parties involved. As a ward councillor, I've seen that recently. Some of you are probably from the Brading area. I had to travel through Brading earlier this year, or couldn't travel through Brading earlier this year, I should say, and we've had direct experience of that. And in some cases, simple things could have been done, simple changes in timing could have been done, would make things so much better. And just generally the communication, even the quality of the road signage is not up to scratch at times. We've all been down a road thinking we can go down there and suddenly you can't. Or you've gone down, haven't been able to go down a road and suddenly someone's told you, oh, it's all right actually, there was a sign in the wrong place. So I'm very pleased that Simon agrees with those views, and I can tell you from speaking to elected members, we now have 22 new councillors out of the 39, but those new ones have certainly come in with those views, and I think all the existing ones are there with those views as well. So there's a strength of opinion and a strength of willingness to do something about it and to do something about those issues I hope I've highlighted there.
So Joe, You and Richard were both Isle of Wight councillors for the past 5 years. So far everyone agrees lots needs to change. What's that thing that hasn't happened in the last 5 years, and how do we change it now?
Yeah, so thanks very much, Martin. It's great to be here. And such a packed church, I must say, on a Friday evening, which is great. The way we do roads on the island is not good, and it hasn't been good enough for a long time. And one of the fundamental reasons behind that is there are too many organisations involved in roads. So as you've heard, the Highways Authority remains the Isle of Wight Council with overall responsibility. But of course, the vast majority of the work is done by Island Roads, a company under contract, under I think a 25-year contract that we're only approximately halfway through. Utility companies have their own powers and rights to be able to dig up the road, Southern Water have been doing a lot, and the gas network too. And all of these organisations not only don't communicate very well with you, me, Richard, the councillors, they don't communicate well enough with each other either. The relationship between the Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads, I think is an open secret. It's not been a very good one, and it needs to improve. And unless and until it improves, your experience, our experience of the roads isn't going to get any better. The coordination of road closures, particularly in the last 6 months to a year, has been terrible. There tends to be an attitude from whichever organisation you talk to, be it the council, be it Island Roads, be it Southern or someone else's, well, we're doing the right thing. We've got these powers, we're allowed to do this. And not enough thought goes into the impact on residents. And perhaps they need to do a bit more than just what they're required to do, go a little bit above and beyond and communicate with other organisations. And I'll just give you 2 examples. The road around Ventnor, Leeson Road, was closed for far too long while the Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads argued about who was responsible for what, down to the ridiculous hole in a path in Lake, which you may have seen was on the front cover of The Observer, I think it was last week. This was a report was made way back last year of a problem with surface water on the lake path, coastal path. And I've now forgotten who dug it up, either Island Roads or Southern Water, to look at the piping underneath and see whether they could deal with the underlying issue. That was in October of last year. A lot of head scratching went on, and barriers were put around the hole, and it was left. It was a hole about that big, and it was left for months. And residents complained, they contacted the ward councillor, they contacted the Isle of Wight Council, they contacted Island Roads, they contacted Southern Water. And no one could give them a consistent answer why, just a few weeks ago, in May of this year, the hole, nothing had been done to the pipe, the hole was exposed, there was a barrier around it, and it was becoming dangerous and unsightly. And it wasn't until I put it on Facebook that suddenly Southern Water and Island Roads spoke to each other, and one or other of them filled the hole back in. But you know what? Nothing happened between digging the hole and filling it back in. They decided that there wasn't a problem after all. The pipe down there wasn't responsible for the surface water. So it took 7 months to dig a hole, find nothing wrong, and fill it again. That is the sort of issue we still have, despite the amount of pressure, public awareness, and public anguish, and despite the pressure that Richard and I, councillors, have put on those organisations. So until they can better communicate with each other, it's not going to get better. It's certainly not going to stop us talking about it and putting all the pressure we can on.
So Fran, you run a big business both sides of the water. How do you see Island Roads, perhaps in that context of Southampton as well?
I think the challenge we see from an Islands Roads perspective does go back to communication. The infrastructure that we connect into is really important, and we know that we frequently discharge large numbers of vehicles into East Cowes, and we know that we see issues with travel backing up through East Cowes. Generally, our work with Island Roads has been very good. We paid for some laser boards, the information signage that was being updated between the council and Island Roads, and the biggest challenge we've had is when we've had feedback saying, why are you not updating the information boards, but it's not actually us to update them. But I think that is now starting to change. We have seen, certainly with Simon coming in now, a desire to change it. So what we want it to be is a smoother connection so that we can update customers and residents much more quickly. You talk about the Southampton side, and we know we do have issues. I would say from the Southampton side, the potholes are worse. The ability to engage with the council for making changes is probably equally challenging. But it's something that we have to be really alert to, because for all of us, whether that's people on this side of the water or on the other side of the water, residents, tourists, everybody needs connectivity, and we need to be looking at connectivity from homes and businesses to end destinations. And for us, that's one of the things we take into account in the way we connect with the Redjet into the Key Connect bus. And I know we don't always get the connection to the train right, and that's something we're working to address. But also on this side, coming in with the buses, and when the roads aren't working, that also delays our customers, and we can't always hold the jets or hold the ferries to allow that to come through. And one of the things we are doing, of course, is with the work in East Cowes. The intent for that is that we will not be holding up so much traffic through East Cowes, so we're waiting on the final planning document for the East Cowes redevelopment. But the main thing with that is it will give us the ability to hold a full car deck of discharged vehicles in our own land space, so we won't be trying to put it out into the road.
Thanks. So Simon, last point before we move on really, is the key issue the relationship between the Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads?
Yes, and I'm coming in recognising that there's history and context to how that relationship is where it is today, but I'm determined to put that right. We have that contract with, I think Joe said, 25 years. We've still got a long term, and I need to reset those behaviours, and I believe there is, certainly the conversations I've had, there's a willingness to do that. I mean, one of the panel made the comment, things shouldn't be allowed to happen, and I think it was probably in my first week, and I encountered the issues between Ryde and Newport. It should never have been allowed to allow the Fairley Road and the Binstead Road works to take place at the same time. So from a professional perspective, me being the Highway Authority and the Traffic Authority, that is a strategic corridor. People commute between Ryde and Newport. It is not acceptable on the island or any other place in the UK for it to take 2 hours and 20 minutes to travel on a bus between Ryde Esplanade and Newport bus station. That is simply unacceptable. I've seen that with my own eyes, and I can't stand up and say that's okay, it can continue. And I have gone to Island Roads and made that clear that that will not continue in the future. We have to be tougher at challenging these issues. We need to change the behaviours so that Island Roads understand. The point has been made by the panel. I think that they are delivering services for the public. There is a responsibility around public service duty. That is what I'm here for. I have a responsibility to you as residents to deliver effective, well-managed roads, and whether I choose to do that through my own teams or that through what I commission, and working with partners such as utility companies, then we will do a better job than what you're currently experiencing at the moment. And I can only say that openly to you on the basis I've only been here a few weeks. I've seen what I've seen, and I'm not accepting it, and I'm prepared to try and make an attempt to improve that for all of you.
Thanks, Simon. I have to say that. Well, that's a message that Simon's given in lots of other smaller places of individually affected businesses and communities, and maybe for the first time in a long time we've actually got to a point where the council genuinely recognises that it needs to manage that relationship with Island Roads and not pass it on. I'm sure we'll come back to that in the questions. But let's move on to question 2. Fran, I'm going to give you the first word on this one, and the question is: many people believe the Isle of Wight has become less attractive to visitors, businesses, and even its own residents because of the cost reliability and availability of transport links. Do you accept that perception?
I think we have to accept perception because, as Richard said earlier, perception is reality. That said, what we're seeing at the moment is a huge increase in domestic tourism demand. So at the moment for us, we've seen bookings made last month for July being up 30% on prior year, and we're seeing things that are approaching back to the 2019 levels. Now, you know, it's no secret Red Funnel's had a difficult couple of years. We had really bad reliability issues. We knew that. We worked really hard to restore that, and we have got reliability very much under control now. It's still not quite where we want it to be for the vehicle ferries, so we're running around about 95% reliability, and we aim for over 98. The 2% in there is around the weather primarily. At the moment with the Red Jet, that's running around about 99% when you take weather out, and around 98% with every factor that affects it in there. The biggest and most important thing we can do as an operator is operate a reliable service. That's the primary function. I think what we see with the perception of travel as a ferry operator, it's around, it doesn't matter, I could tell you it's 99%, I could tell you it's 100%, but it's the service that you get that matters to you. And I know for me, when I travel, if I quite often take the train, I look at the stats for the train when I get to Waterloo, and I don't believe them because they don't apply to the trains that I seem to get. So going back to the attractiveness of the island, I think it's really important right now. We have a massive opportunity on the island to be attractive. We have a situation where the price of airfares is going up through the roof. We're not doing that. We've not put any fuel surcharge into our prices. We hedge our fuel. We have seen a situation where going in and out of Europe is really difficult with immigration, you know, pet passports issues. So I think there's an opportunity now for us all, and I look at my colleagues who are on this panel, as well as more widely, to work together to get more domestic tourism into the island. And I know tourism, for some people, it's not the preferred industry for the island, but it still contributes 40% to the island's economy. It's a massive part, and the more people we can get over, the more money goes into the island economy. For us as operators, the more people we have on the ships, the more services we can put on. So I think for us right now, there is this huge opportunity, and certainly Dom and I have been working to discuss what we can do to improve that.
Thanks, Fran. Dom, you're the man charged with marketing the Isle of Wight. Do you want to give us your take?
Yeah. I think it's important that we don't confuse the challenges with connectivity with a lack of appeal for the Isle of Wight. I think the Isle of Wight has a lot to offer. We've had a bumpy few years in terms of our visitor numbers coming across the island. Last year we did see an increase though in overnight visitors, that rose by 2%. And the early suggestions, as Fran has said, that we're on track for a good summer. I know we had a good half term with the weather, which helped. So that increasingly suggests that the Isle of Wight does remain an attractive destination. I think for me, it's not more of a conversation around desirability, it's more around connectivity. How do we make sure those transport links are reliable and affordable for everyone? I think there's a broader question here around we have very unique challenges that face the islands community. I think there's some national policy that can voice the conversation, things like ETS, the proposed scheme is going to come in, it's going to affect the ferry companies and the pricing model. We've got the proposed overnight levy coming in as well. And then there's also the changes to travel package law that I think could be looked at to really help island businesses strive and drive forward. So perhaps a question for my colleague on the left on that one.
So we've heard about tourism. Joe, I think you've got quite a lot to say about island residents. Do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I mean, for island residents or visitors, the ferries are too expensive, too unreliable, and the services are too infrequent, and they haven't got better, they've got worse. I think the dynamic pricing model on the car ferries is bordering on immoral. It is a lifeline service. These are companies that benefited from public money, your money, during COVID in order to stay afloat, but they are not interested in any public obligation. Now, there is a consensus in the way we do transport in this country. The consensus is that when it is transport that people rely on, they don't have any other choice. There is a role for the public sector. Now, that can be the public sector delivering transport directly, often in cities, or it can be some form of obligation or regulation. We are unique here on the island that we're entirely reliant on unregulated, unsubsidised private companies that are now controlled by private equity groups. And that's why I've been campaigning for change. And by the way, alongside Richard, and I think probably it's one of the most frequent comments I certainly hear is it's good that we've got two island MPs from two different parties who can work together on a really important island issue. But all the while, we try and deliver through government help, because I think ultimately, whatever Red Funnel or Whitelink do to improve some aspects of their services, and there are some small improvements in certain areas, and we've heard today from the Daisy bus that the two ferry companies and the hovercraft have supported them. That is good. But the scale of change that the island deserves, in my view, is only going to be delivered with the hand of government in some way. And that's why the Department for Transport and the government are for the first time engaged. It's frustrating that those roundtable meetings that we've been promised haven't started, but the ex-boss of the MCA has been appointed to deliver those, and we hope that they'll start next month. But I would say this, the ferry companies do have a choice. They do have a choice to avoid government intervention. They do have a choice to make the improvements we need. They haven't to date, but every day there's the opportunity to do that.
So sat here objectively on the end, before I go to Richard, we had a Conservative government for 14 years with a Member of Parliament, previous Member of Parliament, who was a member of that government. We've now actually got the benefit of both, but Richard, we've got a Labour government now with a Labour MP. What's going to happen that didn't happen for the last 14, 15 years? How do we get a government of whatever colour to decide whether, or to decide about that model of operation and whether it wants to intervene in it or not?
Yes, it's a good question. I'll do a little bit on the ferries first, but I won't go back through everything Joe said. But the big issue we've got is no one really talked about ferries since Andrew Turner. I know Andrew's in the audience. It's probably worth giving him a little clap because he was the last person to actually mention ferries in government. And this is no exaggeration. My nickname is Mr. Ferries, and I don't mind being called that to my colleague that's sick of the sight of me and hearing me talk about it. But it was a new problem. And now for us on the island, this seems immensely frustrating and also seems crazy that no one knew. But let's put it in perspective. We're a tiny little island off the south coast. We love our island. We're very proud of it. But the rest of the country is unaware of it unless they've been to visit it. So making that point and having two of us, and me and Joe do often share a orange juice on the terrace to discuss what we're going to do about ferries, is a really good thing for the island because it's not party political. This is something that affects all of us. Now, probably 18 months ago, me and Fran would have been able to sit this close to each other because I'd have given Fran a really hard time. Not to defend ferry companies, because I still can't understand why Whitelink would let them go through themselves, go through the press coverage of £500 for a weekend. But I'm lucky my side, Red Funnel have done quite a lot of things that I've asked for. So things around the NHS travel, still have managed to do lots of work, and free tickets for 18-year-olds has been good. That said, that doesn't answer the wider problems Joe's outlined. Now, for me, the DFT cannot deal with the problem. The problem's too big for the DFT. I've got them to admit that. I'd like to see Cabinet Office oversight, because that means it's being taken seriously across all of government. But the answer is, I am not precious about what the end result is. But the end result has to end up with more reliable, more frequent and cheaper ferries. Now, both ferry companies will agree with that. It's just how we get to that solution. In terms of attractiveness of the island, I think the island's still very, very attractive. As Dom has said, and as Fran said, the numbers of it. What we need to work on is actually convincing people it's a great place to live, work and learn. Because this is an absolutely fantastic asset. I've had several ministers over in the last few months, and all of them have been blown away by the island itself, but the commitment and leadership of people they meet. So when I had the schools minister over, she was absolutely blown away about the plans for education, especially around SEN. Yesterday we had the Minister for Desnes, who is responsible for putting the ETS charge on Whitelink. He was given a pretty hard time, I'd say, yesterday. But again, he was blown over by the depth of discussion and the amount of information he was available to him and how we conducted ourselves. So for the first time ever, the island, sorry Andrew, not for the first time ever, the first time since Andrew, the island is really, really punching above its weight in terms of representation. And my job is, yes, ferries is an issue as all, but the biggest issue is we need to do something about reversing our demographic slide, because we need a load of under 35-year-olds to make sure there's somewhere for us to buy a cup of tea, a pint and a piece of cake when we're all in our dotage.
Thanks, Richard. So Jonathan, the Isle of Wight Council has far more responsibility than any of our MPs, a far broader responsibility than anyone else on the panel. Do you think there's a risk that we get so focused on ferry fares that we actually lose sight of just how important ferries and connectivity across the Solent is to the social and economic well-being and growth of the island?
Well, I think it's all tied together. I don't think there's a risk of loss of focus. Dominic talked to things from the perspective of the tourism trade, and I was just scribbling, well, I'm not a tourist, so I don't experience it in that way, but how I do experience, and I'm sure most people here experience, it's we've probably all got family on the mainland. We probably want to see them more often than we can. My daughter works in London, she visits when she can, I visit her when I can, but it costs. And sometimes the logistics just don't work out to make a trip. So I think there's that domestic element that perhaps we haven't highlighted. And of course the ferries are fundamental to everything on the island. Business, everything has to come here on a ferry. And we know that increases costs. I do agree wholly with what both Joe and Richard have said. I hope there's going to be a change in the government attitude. Previously, when I was the leader of the council, with the support of Andrew, and he was brilliant at this, we got high-level meetings with government, I think with the Transport Minister himself, to ask these questions about regulation, and we might as well not have bothered. He might have well just sat there and go la 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 for all the attention we got. So I really hope that there's a change in attitude, and I think Richard and Joe, Transport Minister from I think Richard and Joe are doing a great job there, because there still seems to be some block in Westminster with understanding that we are an island and there's a bit of water between us and the mainland. There are those apocryphal stories in the past of ministers travelling and not realising they had to get out of their car at some point. I heard it happened earlier this year. I won't say which department, but a team came down from a government agency and had to be advised, you do know you need to get a ferry. You do need to know you need to book it. They didn't realise that. It's farcical. So that lack of, well, we're talking about perception question, but that lack of perception and understanding in Westminster needs to change, and I think Richard and Joe are doing good things there. The other factor that perhaps hasn't been mentioned so far that can be brought into this, we are now members of a combined authority. It's just been signed off, it's just come into being, and that is a body that will have a direct responsibility for strategic transport. My intention as the island's representative on that body is certainly to make the ferries, our connectivity I should say, a key issue for that body and to see what can be done through that body to address the issues that we all suffer from.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm sure we're going to come back to the topic of ferries in our open questions later. But let's move on to, all these topics are related. So question 3 is, residents and businesses often feel responsibility for the island's travel and tourism challenges are passed between different organisations. Big question of mine, who should be driving change in tourism, and where has that accountability been lacking or missed? Dominic, do you want to tell us your thoughts?
Yeah, good question, Mark. I think the challenges of the island don't sit neatly within one organisation. We've heard about a number of different topics, from ferries to roads, and I think the solution really sits within collaboration. From Visit Isle of Wight's perspective, we're really ready to take the lead on that conversation. We've been very vocal, as you mentioned, around the roads. We've fed into the cross-Solent report around our membership's feedback around ferries and the connectivity issues. And I think the growth in this area really comes from the people that are on this table, working collaboratively and challenging each other in a sensible fashion.
Thanks, Dom. Simon, you've been here 4 weeks. What's your perception of the island's ability to have clear accountability and and clear lines of who's leading on which subject?
I mean, absolutely, there's a requirement to work collaboratively across this. As Dominic's pointed out, there are different parts of this that have got different responsibilities, and I think there is good practice. I mean, I've had the opportunity to be involved in this week in the Transport Infrastructure Forum, which brought together a number of the transport providers. But I think where we've got to sort of support each other, I think, get a shared and common understanding of what those challenges are. I think that's to some extent part of the challenge here, is that we've tried, rather than sort of ploughing on with slightly different focuses, so we've got to actually try and get that common understanding and try and make tangible differences. I was just reflecting a little bit on the previous question around the transport system, but it's not, a good transport system isn't just the ferries, it's the buses, it's the cycling, it's the pedestrian, it's the roads, and we've got to actually make sure that it's all joined up and talking together. I think, having worked in this sector so long, one of the biggest challenges I've yet to see overcome is integrated ticketing. If you're going to come to the island, it's multimodal. You're going to have, as someone said a moment ago, you're going to have to get out of your car, you're going to have to use different forms of transport, and giving the end user more confidence and reliability requires all of us to work together. It's also about ensuring we can get the right funding and collectively pooling that funding to deliver better outcomes. So I think coming into this role, I've met a number of people over the last few weeks, and I think from a council perspective, there's a very clear commitment to reset and work more collegiately with those colleagues, because one organisation won't necessarily have all the answers, and it will take a combined effort to tackle some of the challenges I think that have been rightly raised in this forum today.
Thanks, Simon. So, Fran, most of your business is, well, all of your business is travel related, isn't it? A huge part of it's tourism. Do you think we've got a very clear focus and a very driven island, or do you get frustrated with perhaps the number of organisations and meetings and places you've got to go to help drive the economy?
I mean, there are a lot of meetings, and I think some of that does go back to the strategic view for the island. For us at Red Funnel, we're very clear about what we're responsible for and accountable for, and that is for delivering a reliable service and for making sure that we're providing services at the best price we can. And I know that that's very subjective, and I know that I can tell you all the stats on our side, and Joe will tell you it was £511, not with us, for that, but we do appreciate that the cost of travel is often a barrier to travel. Going back to the point that Simon's just made though, one of those pieces is around the end-to-end journey as well. And we know that quite often when people are getting off the ferry, they're not just going into Southampton, they may be going further afield. And I think one of the big opportunities we've got at the moment is to look at combined ticketing. We've got the new owners, new partners, they've been in now for 6 months, and one of the projects we're working on is to make our ticketing fairer and more transparent and to make it easier to buy a ticket. We've listened to your feedback that says that our website and our app are too clunky, and we're looking at that at the moment. But I think the main thing in terms of the decision making, we have the very good, what was the Transport Infrastructure Board is now the Transport Infrastructure Forum, but that is very operationally focused. What I think we need to do collectively and do better is to strategically have these discussions to say that what we collectively as an island want to achieve over the next 12 months is kind of already that's in the making. What we need to be doing is looking to say where we want to build the island. As Richard says, we want to be able to get more young people onto the island, and we've been working with you to try and encourage transfers over. But we do have an ageing demographic. Richard and I were at a roundtable recently, 2 days ago, talking about the levels of deprivation on the island. So it is really important that we have a strategic view of the island and that we all work collaboratively to improve that.
Thanks, Fran. So Richard, we're going to have a mayor authority and a mayor from Solent soon. Is that part of the solution, or is it just going to make it worse?
No, it's good. I mean, the way to think about that is it's very easy to sort of create division and say, oh my goodness me, we're going to disappear again amongst Hampshire. It's quite the opposite. For the first time ever, we'll get a seat at the big table. And the way to think about it is currently, all decisions go through Whitehall. So say you have an idea, Mark, to say you want to give away free ice cream every Sunday morning. You have to send that into Whitehall. They come back a year later and say, well, we're going to give half a scoop of mint choc chip on Monday. It's not what you asked for, but you've got to accept it, because otherwise you'll get nothing. What happens is our bit of Whitehall moves to Hampshire. So we're much closer to the decision making, so the decision will be made much quicker. You can go back and say, no one wants mint choc chip, it's vanilla all the way. And I know it's a facile example, but that's the best way I can think of describing it. I think there's a real opportunity for us to show the rest of Hampshire how important we are to their economy. On my side alone, 5 of the business anchors I've got together to help me solve this problem around children not in education, employment or training, which is a huge issue for the Highland. And we are a time machine in all the wrong ways. We are a vision into the 15 years of the future of the rest of the country, but in a bad way in terms of these things. Just 5 of those businesses have got a combined turnover of over £500 million. The Isle of Wight is not some backwater. It's quite an innovative place. I might say again, down the River Medina, at one point in the 70s, it was a linear mile of industrialisation. It had more patents than anywhere in Europe, if not the world. The island can do this stuff. So when we say, is the problem being passed around? Yes, it is. You know why? We're too small to be a unitary authority that has to go to Whitehall. But we are going to remain a unitary authority for control of all the things that cost us all of the money, adult social care, children's social care, the reason we run out of money every year. We'll keep all those things, and you'll get your bins emptied, but now we'll be able to go straight to the elected mayor and say, we need better. And it will be listened to on that day. So to answer the point, has it been passed around? Yes, it has. What should we do about it? The people in this room, the people on this panel, and some of the other people we talk to, we are the ones that need to start driving this change. It's very easy to say when things are bad. But if we really want this island to do well, every single one of us in this room tonight has to walk out here and say, you know what, I'll try a little bit, because I love this island, it's where I live. And we can, because it has been a fantastic place for me for the last 22 years. I am not prepared for it to slip backwards, and that is why we need to work together on challenges like travel and tourism.
Thanks, Richard. I'm a great fan of ice cream. Joe, is Richard's sale good, or am I being sold enough ice cream here?
Yeah, I might avoid the ice cream anecdote. I'll leave that one to Richard. Look, the original question was who should be driving tourism. I mean, there's some obvious answers. Visit Isle of Wight, that's why they're there. And I think Visit Isle of Wight is in very good hands with Dominic, I must say. And his engagement, certainly with me, I think with both MPs has been excellent. Yes, the ferry companies have a role to drive tourism. I won't repeat my criticism of them, but clearly they want more people on their boats. That would drive their business, whether they do that independently or through Visit Isle of Wight. I think they do both, and I'd like to see more of it. The council obviously has a role. We need to make sure that the visitor experience when people are here, the only thing we can't control is the weather, but we can control everything else. So the council has a role to play in ensuring the visitor experience is a good one. But ultimately, the main driver of tourism on this island is businesses, is small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, and the tens of thousands of people who work in and around tourism and hospitality, who are the public face of the Isle of Wight, people in this room. And I think here is where I would have to lay some criticism on the government, on the Chancellor particularly. We've had 2 budgets. That has made it harder for small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in tourism and hospitality. The taxes have increased on them, and that's why I've been very critical of that. And that is part of my role, is not only to win the arguments locally about ferry support, Visit Isle of Wight, the council, is to also, obviously in Westminster, make those arguments with our other MPs, that when you tax something, you get less of it. If you tax tourism, you're probably going to get less of it. And that's why I'm very against the visitor levy. The government will tell you it's just a power for the mayor to decide whether to use one day or not. But I suspect what will happen is the mayor will get given more and more powers to do things, but without the money, and the government will say, well, you go and raise the money through that visitor levy that we've allowed you to do, and we will have a tourist tax. So taxation plays a very big role in the visitor economy on the Isle of Wight, and I'm hoping Andy Burnham has a solution by choosing a better chancellor than the current one.
You've all been violently agreeing on this panel so far, so come on Richard, let's have a bit of disagreement.
Yeah, look, I am never going to define. Putting people's wages up is always a good thing. I'm an employer, we employ about 25 people. The minimum wage isn't affect us because we pay the real living wage because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, but some of my national insurance contributions have gone up. We know how much by? I don't know, I didn't calculate it because I've got to pay it. I've had this argument with many businesses, big businesses, small businesses. And it's addressing the wrong fundamental question. We need somebody to rebuild this country. I think most people agree in the lead up to 2024 election that something needed to change. Now, I don't expect you to mark my homework so far, because I'd probably not get the answer I wanted. But think back to that point. Is things weren't working. Now, you cannot run an economy on a race to the bottom, and that's where we were. So we have asked people to pay more, and we've asked small businesses to be the hero in this piece. And I think what we haven't done very well is thank them to say thank you actually for rebuilding this country. You know, post-war we had to lean on people like small business to rebuild this country, and that's what we've got to do. So I will defend all day long the Chancellor's decision on this. As for the visitor levy, now most of you, or many of you, would have paid the visitor levy on when you'd gone to places and not even realised it, and you'd have had a lovely time. We're talking probably £1.50 a night. Now, if that means you can properly fund an organisation that is responsible for bringing tourism to this island, it's ring-fenced and it helps clean the beaches all year round, get the bins emptied, make sure roads and pavements are repaired, and give a better offering as well as better marketing, then I'm yet to meet somebody that won't pay less than the price of a cup of coffee to make sure they have a good experience. So that's where I am. On the fence, you could say.
Jonathan, the visitor levy is going to allow us to repair the roads, market the Isle of Wight. Does the good old Isle of Wight counts? What's your view of what the visitor levy is going to do?
I'd hope it would be a positive thing. I think the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating somewhat. We veered away from the question a little, I feel. I mean, I was going to agree with the statements about, and this question mentions both travel and tourism, that need for collaboration. There needs to be someone in each case that takes the lead. I think sometimes that has been lacking. I think Visit Isle of Wight obviously is the lead for tourism, but working with everyone else. So I do think those are the important features of the question as asked. And I do think we are on the cusp of something with the combined authority. As has been said, there are going to be powers handed down. It's about getting things closer to home and more local control. I've spoken
relation to the previous question about just a lack of understanding in Westminster about certain aspects of the island, how we operate, where we are. I think when some of those powers come to a combined authority that is directly led by members from the islands, Portsmouth, Southampton, Hampshire, we will get better decisions, better understanding leading to those decisions, and that's going to be an important part of dealing with what the question is asking about.
So Don, final word on this. What's the most important thing for tourism on the Isle of Wight?
I think if I had to put my finger on exactly the biggest challenge that we're facing as the islands deal at the moment, it's definitely not a lack of product. The Isle of Wight, I think, is the most amazing place in the world. Lots of fantastic restaurants, brilliant beaches, brilliant place to live. From my perspective, it's investment into the DMO. The products there, the appeals there, the ambitions there. I think we need to find a funding model for DMO that recognises the importance of tourism to our economy and gives our destination the fighting chance to stand up there with the likes of alternative choices within the UK. As an organisation, we're coming up to our next bid cycle renewal. We're looking at how can we help those smaller businesses. We're looking at implementing things like changing the billing cycle, monthly direct debits. We're also looking at potentially discussing implementation of a step levy. So those bigger, larger businesses that have more of a touch point with tourism pay the most into the levy structure, and we feel that will really give us a substantial pot of money to shout about how fantastic the Isle of Wight is moving forward. So, in one answer, it's investment.
Brilliant. So, our final questions of the set questions, and I'm looking for a really quick answer a quick fire answer from each of our panellists. Looking ahead to the next 12 months, what's one realistic commitment you can make tonight that Islanders should be able to judge you on by the time we come back for the next debate? Jonathan.
I think the commitment from me is to try and make the council we have work positively as a facilitator of improvement. I think we have had a council in recent years that has quite rightly got a very poor reputation from being just a load of infighting, argument, tribalism, conflict, which meant its effectiveness has been limited, and most people have seen it as a block rather than something, a body that could actually help or achieve anything. So I would like to try and achieve a council that actually works together as one body to assist the island and alongside that, so it's two things really, to feed into or work with the combined authority so as to combine as an engine, two engines for positive development.
Don.
From my perspective, the success of the Isle of Wight is built on the success of the tourist businesses that it represents. So my commitment is that the organisation will strive forward to being a better advocate for tourism businesses, pushing better communication, better coordination and standing up for those issues that affect those businesses.
Oh, this is a difficult one, Richard. Go on.
Dead easy for me. My entire focus is to get all the pupils at Leader School that aren't going to university a pathway into decent employment and work experience. I want to go high hundreds, but I want to certainly do more than 200 a year. That's where we need to be, because at the moment we've got a lost generation of suffering anxiety and mental health issues that don't actually understand what's out there.
That'd be great. Graham?
Yeah, just as a bit of background, yesterday was my 8-year anniversary with Red Funnel, and it's safe to say, looking back, it was definitely not what I think I had expected on the tin, and we had far more challenges than I ever foresaw when I started 8 years ago. In the last 2 years, we've rebased the balance sheet, we've got the debt levels down to less than 4%, 4 times, sorry. We are now in a really strong position with investors who are investing into the business. Now, I know for me, for the last 6 months, I've been living and breathing that investment with these owners. For my staff, for Red Funnel colleagues, they're not seeing that come through yet. We're seeing it in things like reliability improvements, we're seeing investment in spares, technology. it takes time to wash through. But my commitment to you tonight, today, is that we will rebuild your trust in us one journey at a time. We won't always get it right, it will take us time. But we will strive for that, and we will rebuild your trust in us.
Thanks, Fran. I think that's a refreshingly honest, honest promise there as well. Joe?
Well, mine's rather ambitious because I'm slightly reliant on a government and a governing party that I'm not a member of. But what I would like to see in a year is some obvious shift and sign that the government, and that includes Whitehall, I'm not just talking about ministers, but Whitehall as well, recognise what it's like living on an island and the uniqueness of trying to do all the ordinary things that are so ordinary on the mainland. So be that funding social care, be it funding children's services, be it the council block grant, and particularly connectivity with the mainland. And I hope we will have moved that ferry debate on, that we will have had those 6 monthly roundtable meetings which will have identified some things that the ferry companies are prepared to do by negotiation, and it will have identified the things that the ferry companies are saying they can't do and why they can't do them, and then we engage with the government about what Whitehall is prepared to do and where we go from there. But all of this is going to fundamentally require Westminster, in the broadest sense, to understand the uniqueness of the only properly populated English island, because every other island with a population of more than the size of Bembridge is either connected to the mainland or it's in Scotland with the Scottish Government helping it.
I hate to say this, Simon, but I think you probably know what the Isle of Wight wants of you.
I believe I do. So first, the council a few months ago chose me to come in and take on this role. I think I've come here recognising what a great opportunity, because the island's unique. There's a number of challenges, and I think in the first 15 minutes I realised the sentiment in this room that I haven't got, that the council doesn't have the trust of its residents and communities around the management of roadworks. So in the next 12 months I'm going to try and rebuild that trust with you, and that starts with greater oversight and accountability of how we're managing, coordinating that, improving the communication and making sure that we're managing the highway network and infrastructure, both in the short term and in the long term in a more effective way than is currently being undertaken. So I'd be delighted to come back in 12 months' time, and if I've made a difference, it'd be great to hear. But that doesn't stop you between now and 12 months' time, letting me know your concerns and issues.
Thanks, Simon, that's great. So, we've done our preset questions. We've got some questions that have been pre-submitted, but look, you've all been sat here for an hour and 10 minutes listening to those preset questions. So if we're ready, let's take a completely unplanned question from the floor. Can you just tell us who you are first?
Microphone works. It does. Good. Yeah, Nigel Talbot. I'm from the Solent Transport User Group, formerly known as the Whitelink User Group. Yeah, we changed from Whitelink User Group in order that we could have meaningful discussions with both Whitelink and British Modern, which is what we've been having. I'm really pleased to say that in the time that we've existed, I'm also pleased to say that Joe and Richard have taken up our campaign, so we'll have it, so thank you for doing that. In the time that we've existed, we now have very meaningful and positive talks with both Fran and Katie Taylor, CEO of Whitelink, and things are discussed, which we've already talked about, such as reliability, frequency, cost, and things we are getting somewhere. The atmosphere between ourselves and the ferry companies has improved enormously. We're no longer out on the streets waving our placards and asking to be noticed. And hopefully we won't have to do that again. Maybe we will, but for the moment that is off the agenda because we're having good positive talks with both the ferry companies. However, what we would like is to continue to campaign, and we are campaigning for regulation, which we believe is very important. We're campaigning ownership. Of course, we're looking for the ownership model, and we're looking as well for more competition. And we're going to campaign for those three things in addition to all the other things.
Nigel,
getting to the
question.
Yes, indeed. So let me ask a hypothetical question. We've got two MPs which are very supportive of the transport on the island. It's something that they've been campaigning for openly, and I'm grateful for that, and won't stop. I'm very grateful for that. So let me ask a hypothetical question. If there was a ferry company on the island which was ready to go, that could be in competition with Whiteley and Red Funnel, and had everything ready to go, all they needed was support from government, would the panel, Richard and Joe particularly, support that bid?
Thank you. Can you retrieve the microphone? Richard.
So, it's an interesting point. Yes, I mean, I was both ferry companies are privately owned, and I don't think Fran would say she wouldn't, should be against competition because, you know, my businesses have faced competition. But if you're saying you're going to subsidise, because the government's going to subsidise a new business, well then you have to offer that same subsidy to the business. That's the problem you're going to have. So it's whether would I support it? Yes, I would support it. Would the government support? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's probably, unfortunately, far too complicated to know. Because to me, I'd say whatever that looks like, would that money be better off shared three ways so that all transport routes across the Severn are cheaper? But that's a really terrible answer, I know. But I'm trying to be honest.
Joe.
Well, yeah, I'm in favour of competition. If another ferry company wants to set up, it can. The problem is the barriers to entry are so high because you've got to buy a bit of land that's got to be viable for bringing in the ferry, and you've got a massive maze of planning and environmental applications in order to do it. So I get that you said it's a hypothetical question. I think it's quite low down in the most important questions around how we connect to the mainland. And as Richard has already said, if government are putting money in, that's a state subsidy, which is a legal minefield, and the two ferry companies that already exist will want their money as well. So with great respect, I'm not sure that's going to take us any further right now.
Thank you both. We're going to move on. As I said before, can you just tell us who you are before you ask the question? Thanks.
David Moynihan. Quick question. Are Island Roads in compliance with their contract?
We know who's going to answer it. Simon, don't feel the need to talk through every clause of the contract. We'll get Simon to tell us where he's got to first, and I think we'll get Jonathan to say something.
All right, okay. So, in terms of meeting the main points of the contract, they are probably meeting the minimum requirements that they're asked to undertake. I think when it comes to roadworks and street works, which I think is part of the challenges that I think many residents are experiencing, I would suggest that we're not necessarily delivering what you know, to the good practice and standards you would experience elsewhere. That, I think the point was made earlier on by one of the panel members. We are the Highway Authority and Traffic Authority, and I've said a few moments ago that we need to get better oversight and accountability of what has been happening. I feel there's been a little bit of drift in the last few years around what they're required to do, and I think that needs to be reset and they need to be held more accountable in that space.
So Jonathan, to be fair, the contract changed, didn't it, partway through? You've been on the council on and off throughout a fair bit of the PFI, and probably a period in which a different administration actually renegotiated the contract. Is it all about compliance with the contract? Is it about the basic contract itself, or the changes to it?
My view is, as Simon says, there's probably compliance with the contract in word, if not in spirit. But my view is it's a bad contract. I'm the one surviving member from 2013 who didn't vote for it at the time. I'm quite proud of that, because I do not think the contract has served us well over the years. I wasn't actually a member at the point you're referring to, Mark, but I think that is one of the stages, which I think I alluded to earlier, at which a massive opportunity was lost to try and get back some control. There have been, again, as I said earlier, a number of events over the years where the balance in the contract and the ability to run it properly and in the spirit I hope it was intended in were lost. When the contract started, for example, I won't go through a full list, but the management of the contract, the oversight of the contract, left the council, despite the fact that we are the Highways Authority. In 2013, everyone to do with highways was lifted out of County Hall, sent down the road, and one person was left. And that was the oversight the council had at that point, and for several years afterwards. There's been a clawing back of that over the years, but with the cutbacks the council has had, the ability to claw back, I think sufficient control has just not been within the capacity of the council. So I'm veering off slightly, but yeah, I think part of the problem in a way is the fact that the contract is being complied with. It's a bad contract and the opportunities to reset it have been missed time and time again.
So I'll make my comment. I think we're 13 years through a 25-year contract. We're past halfway, hasn't worked properly, hasn't delivered. We've still got another 12 years of it, and I think the message is loud and clear, isn't it? We're not going to have we can't have another 12 years of the 13 that we've got, but I think everyone on the panel understands that, and I think perhaps most importantly, we've got an experienced senior officer turned up in Simon who, if nothing else comes out of tonight, who has heard the unanimous view of the audience here tonight that something needs to change. It needs to change dramatically, and it needs to change pretty quickly too. Thanks, Joe. Can we take another question from the floor? The lady down here at the front. You can just tell us who you are first, thank you.
Hello, I'm Debbie Andre from Sandown. So whilst I appreciate that the ferries do provide us with a good service, I don't appreciate, and Joe alluded to it earlier, their dynamic pricing. I am aware, and I'm not sure if this actually does apply to River, but I am aware that the holiday parks are given ridiculously cheap flat fares of about £60. So in the short term, I would like to see that scrapped, and I would like to see, because we've heard a lot about visitors coming to the island, but I'd like to hear more about what's being done for residents. I'd like to see a flat fare, a sensible flat fare of about £60 that doesn't isolate and discriminate against residents. But I'd like to ask the panel members, do they agree that in the long term, the connectivity of this island will only thrive? Even the Shetland Islands now are talking to the Faroes about fixed links. That's always going to be the elephant in the room. We need not in the short term, in the long term. We need to get that study done, and we need to have that fixed link tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That's the two question in one trick. Fran, do you want to talk about how you price your ferries? Because I'm sure there's some greater explanation of that.
Yeah, well, and I do appreciate the dynamic pricing. It's not a popular model. One of the things that I would say, and obviously I'll pull some stats, actually the average price for a return journey from here for an island resident up for this year, for a return journey for a car was £75.66. The average for somebody using the Big Book of Savings was £69.80. That's the average, and they are the stats. Again, if you haven't seen that, you won't believe it. I can give you those. The main thing with dynamic pricing, ultimately, is that it allows us to discount a lot of the other tickets. It's the same as the airlines. It's not ever going to be necessarily popular, but the flat rate would be significantly higher if we didn't have the dynamic pricing. Alongside that, as I said, we have made a commitment to improve our pricing structure and make it more transparent, and that work is coming through. You also mentioned around the offers that, they're not really offers, sorry, the travel concessions we make to some of the tourist attractions. Now, a lot of those are done on a volume basis. So again, they're priced against the level of trade that is expected to come through, and they have to hit the thresholds. And also around that to attract the tourism of the island to come back into the economy. The final point I think you talked about was fixed rate pricing. We have, and I'm often told, why can't you do the multi-link like Whitelink does? We've actually introduced a pricing model which is a prepay model. Now I know that not everyone can prepay extensively up front, but we are looking at those models, and we're also looking at subscription models for that. I'm sorry? The subscription model, I think, does guarantee the price that we pay. I will have to look to see how it's booked, because I think it's a booking model, it's not a turn up and go, but I will check and come back to you on that. The final point you did make about fixed link, I don't think that's a question for me, actually.
Okay. Thanks, Fran. We'll look forward to your transparent update, for want of a better word, on the pricing structure. One of the things that I think I'll look forward to is seeing Whitelink's reaction to your review and vice versa. And I think that's perhaps one of the things that we'll really look forward to. You know, you told us now your business has been rebased, and actually, from my point of view, we talked about competition earlier, but to see a bit more visible competition for market share between Whitelink and Red Funnel, I think would be a relatively small but significant movement.
Whitelink here?
I don't know, I work for Red Funnel.
Well, I think that's a question for Whitelink, not anybody else. Anyway, there was a second part of the question about fixed link. Joe?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I think Fran said the average price for crossing the Solent by car on Red Funnel was £75. I mean, I've never paid that little. Why, if that's the average, why don't you just make that flat rate? We'll all pay £75 to take the car.
Go on, Fran. Have another go.
Because, yeah, so without getting into the statistics of the average, and forgive me while I just look at the actual notes, the number of, and I appreciate these are quite big numbers, and the number of island residents who paid over £300 per return, which I agree is a lot, was 0.003% to 3 people for us. The number of island residents who paid over £200 per return was 0.26. The majority of tickets...
We just don't charge...
It's too expensive.
But they are travelling, so the majority of people are travelling within an island. The island day trip rate is around about £54 per return, and the minimum price that an island resident will pay for a car, and the capacity of the car, so 5 or 7 people, is £44 per return. And that's with the Big Book of Savings. So those prices, they are there on every single sailing.
I think there's a really interesting point in there, Fran, where you said over £300 is really exceptionally expensive. Whitelink aren't in the room today. Would you ever have a £511 ferry crossing over Festival, or do you have a model? Does your dynamic pricing model actually allow you to cap those prices?
With competition law, I have to be careful in what I say, as you'll understand there. In terms of a £500 ticket over Festival, that is not in our pricing structure in current today's prices. So when you say, would you ever, I don't know what inflation is doing, and I'll hand that to my MP colleagues to manage. But our whole goal is to get as many people over as possible, and that includes getting mainland residents and mainland freight over. It allows for tourism coming over and to support resident travel. We do understand how important it is. I know how ferry pricing affects it, and our goal is to get as much travel as possible. Now, everyone will say to me, well, if you cut the prices, people will come, but they don't. We took the 2310 Redjet out, and I know that was really unpopular, but that sailing cost us £250,000 a year to run, and it carried an average of 9 people on it. It was not sustainable, and when we're operating at that level, that then means that other sailings are subsidising, other ticket prices are subsidising that particular crossing. Now, what we've done with that Redjet, we've heard your feedback, we've been very targeted this year, and you see we've put in quite a few of those late night Redjets, particularly around shows where you told us that that was the last one for football, and also we've been offering a sponsorship model where we've had some people who've sponsored the service to put those on. But it is always a balance, and if I just give you a flavour of the occupancy levels, we run our vehicle ferry over the year, the average level of occupancy is 47%, and for the Redjets it's below 28%. So we operate a lot of non-profitable, very empty sailings, but they are all really important, and the balance that we have to make is to try and keep the ticket prices as low as possible. We do need to be a profitable business, and alongside that, we need to maintain the frequency of service, and that's a balancing act. And from my side, I give you my word, I will always do my best to do it. You will never believe me, and I will never make you happy on it. But I do work towards that, because that's what makes Red Funnel a sustainable business, and that's what supports the island.
John, while we're on this, is it all about price on ferries? Or are there other really important factors as well? Because there's a danger, I guess, that I said it earlier, we become so focused on price that actually we lose some of the other really important elements of how we attract visitors to the island and get people off.
Yeah, I think you referenced the tickets, the holiday parks, things like that. From my perspective, from the tourism side of the fence, I think there's bigger questions around those, around travel package laws and what the government can do that to improve the visibility of that, to attract visitors across the island. I think that also then goes back around to what attractions and our tourism offering are able to do. There's a lot of sites on the island that want to make development. Sometimes there are challenges with planning and the pace at which planning moves. There's a lot of innovative businesses on the island that have a lot of good ideas, but sometimes the process of bringing those ideas to life isn't always the easiest, and that defers our ability to bring products to the market as well. So I think there's a lot of broader issues outside of that within the tourism space on the island, definitely.
And we mustn't lose sight of it.
No.
Do any of you have a panellists want to say anything before we move on?
Yeah,
Richard?
I think if both CEOs want to quite happily abandon the dynamic pricing, because it's a subject they spend far too long talking about, and if there's a sensible solution, I trust they will find it, because that's what CEOs do. But the really thing about the prices, so Nigel was asking the question earlier, and throw companies, we come up with average prices with Evergreen. So one of the really good things that happened is Brian Johnson, actually the MCA, has now been sponsored by John to go and get independent verification of all these numbers. So then at least we'll know, at least we'll be able to have a proper conversation about what they are. In terms of the fixed link, I'm 50-50 whether we have one, because I think that would have to come down to a referendum for Irelanders to decide what they want to. There are lots of worries about it. People always talk about the amount of traffic it brings to the island. My biggest concern is what happens to the people that live here just disappearing every day, and we lose all our talent, or even in an even worse position than we are now. But I've written 5 letters to different ministers, DFT, MHCLG, HMT. I've written to the male candidates, only one's replied, Lauren Fielk, the Labour candidate, saying she would support the viability study. I'm currently approaching universities, other funding bodies to both find out the best source of funding, but the best source of funding to get the viability study done will be devolution, because that's the place where the money will be available. If viability study is done, then that's down to islanders to decide what they want to do next.
So Richard, you're signed up to the viability study?
Signed up to the viability study, just in terms of if we continue having this conversation, it's a bit like having a conversation blind, you know, you need to have facts and figures in front of you.
Joe, are you signed up to it?
I'd perfectly happy to see a viability study for a fixed link, provided it's not paid for by islanders and it's not paid for out of money that could be used for something else. But if it's money that's only going to come effectively from governments, one way or the other, for viability studies, yeah, so let's have one.
Presumably not paid for by those who benefit from fixed link, building fixed links.
None of that.
There you go. Jonathan, leader of the council for a couple of weeks. Are you signed up to the principle of funding a fixed link study, not necessarily from the council, but we should do it?
I've agreed for many years we should have such a study. I think I was contacted when I was last leader back in 2015 by a well-known campaigner, and I wrote a public letter saying, yes, I support the feasibility study. The question is the funding, but I think as Richard's pointed out, we have a combined authority coming forward. It will certainly be on the list of asks for the combined authority to see, as Richard said, we have this question. And there are going to be some very clear answers and information that such a study could bring forward. I'll go out on a limb here and say my guess will be the feasibility study will show that any sort of fixed link will probably take so long and cost so much as to be beyond the reaches of reality. But I do think that we should have the information so we'll all have a view on that. My view can be proved wrong if necessary, or if it is right, what it will actually do is focus the argument on where I think we should be looking for a quicker answer, which is regulation. I think that is the way we will solve this in the long term.
So, come on, let's have a quick poll of the audience. Who thinks we ought to have a study into the benefits or disbenefits of the fixed link? Let's see those who are in favour. And those who don't think we should. There's an awful lot of abstainers there.
What about a straw poll of the fixed link itself?
Well, I suppose there's an argument that says the purpose of the study is to inform us so that we know, and I think from my point of view, I think that's the most important thing. But yeah, you know, why not? You know, who already believes that we should? Well, I'm going to actually phrase that slightly differently. Who believes that a fixed link is the panacea to solve our ills on the Isle of Wight? Now that's a very interesting one. And who believes that, come hell or high water, the last thing this island needs is a fixed link to the mainland? I think that's a clear view. I remember when I was leader of the council, I stood up, I think, in my first full council meeting, and I had to say all sorts of words. Jonathan's done it a couple of times. And I tried to think of something that wasn't boring and the same old, and I stood there and I said, I'm in favour of a tunnel off this island. Right. There was this huge, and then I said to France, and maybe that's the third option that we should look at, although apparently links with Europe are coming back into fashion, so who knows what we might see in the future. There's a lady right at the back next to you, Carl. Could we have a question there? It's on your left, Carl.
Hi, I just want to come back to something that Fran said earlier, which I think is important. We're talking currently about the state of the island, but we're not talking about its future. We're not talking about where we want to be in 50 years' time. We're not talking about the fact that we're losing our young people and that we have massive demographic decline and problematic educational system. Where are we going on the island? Where do we want to be in 50 years' time? What are the businesses that we want to have? What do we want our young people to be here for? We're speaking at the minute about all the problematic elements that we know we need to fix, but we also need to know where we're going to go, and I'd be interested in people's thoughts on that.
Thank you. I think there's a really interesting point that says if you believe that the ferries are the constraint on the growth of the Isle of Wight for negative reasons, that actually in reality they should be the driver for growth on the Isle of Wight in positive reasons. So actually, you know, they are so pivotal, not just to... We talk a lot about, you know, how we feel that the ferries, you know, detract from the ability of the island. Actually, in reality, they should be the drivers of economic growth for the island. Frank, can you answer that question that came in that we've had in mind?
Yeah, for sure, and I think the first thing I would say is that actually some of those conversations are going on, particularly about the demographic of the island, and I was at an all-party parliamentary group 2 days ago with both Joe and with Richard, where that was the exact topic, focusing on 3 areas: Solent, Havant and the Isle of Wight. And I think we were probably all really shocked at some of the data from the Office of National Statistics, which shows how important it is that all of us work together, and the ferries absolutely have a part to play in this, but it is really important that we focus on getting young people onto the island and young people stay on the island, and that we can improve the services that are already on the island. Because Richard will no doubt give you the statistics in a moment. It was really shocking to hear how the island is changing. Alongside that, we've got great industry on the island. We have still got a maritime hub here. We've got some big businesses. We've got loads of small businesses and loads of micro businesses. And those businesses are thriving. And if we work together and have a plan that actually takes us into that 50-year pace, and that we're all driving in the same direction, I think we will see an improvement and we will see a change, but it's not going to happen without the conversation. So I'm really pleased that, notwithstanding we don't always agree on things with my MP colleagues, but we are having conversations, and that needs to be expanded further out.
So before we come to the 2 MPs, Jonathan, you know, you're sat there as leader of the Isle of Wight Council, and ultimately you're responsible for, you know, not just, you know, a part of economic growth, but the bottom line is you're responsible for social services, for education on the Isle of Wight. How do we change that demographic? How do we raise the aspirations and the standards of education on the island into the long term?
I think if I was able to answer that question in one short reply, I shouldn't be leader of the council, I should be president of the world. There's so much in there. I think the question is possibly given the subject for next year's debate, frankly. Those are all things that need to be addressed, because we do have problems on the island. They have some brilliant things here, but we have very low education standards. We need to improve those. We need to ensure there's skills training, support for youngsters going to work, more appropriate jobs, work on those really good industries that have some of the high-level small engineering stuff that's done on the island is amazing. We have serious health challenges on the island, both physical and mental. A statistic I learned earlier this week, there's life expectancy and there's healthy life expectancy. We have the lowest healthy life expectancy in this country. I'm apparently past it, I'm failing already, but we also have to look after our environment. A lot that makes this island special is land we have, the scenery we have, and we need to ensure we protect that, because that can lead on to so much more in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of employment. We need to improve our housing situation. We need to make sure that people have the right houses and they can afford to live in them. How we achieve all that well, I think an answer that's been, a word that's been used a lot before is collaboration, working together. I don't think we've had enough of that in recent years. I think getting, as Mark said at the beginning, one of my aims at the council is trying to make sure the council does actually work together as one body rather than just a bunch of 39 people shouting at each other once a month. And I think if we can get some of that set in place, we can start to look at those challenges, and we need the right people with the right skills and knowledge to do that and bring them in and have a situation where they're happy to work with us, will work with us, we can work with them. But yeah, to try and answer that question, other than say it just leads on to so many other questions and challenges. But I think we actually need to, probably the answer is we need to just recognise that and recognise that we need to work together to those ends.
Thanks. Richard?
Back to Nora's question, what do we remember about in 50 years? So the island stats booklet of the island 2040, island 50 years time is a Bible on my desk. If you haven't seen it, get a copy of it. It's dire, but it shouldn't be an excuse for us all to sit back and wither. It's a call to action. So going back to what I said about the island was once great, and we know where those sort of slogans get us, so I won't use that sort of make the island great again slogan. But we can do this. Now the problem we've got, when I went in the 24 election, every business I went to a lot of businesses, said we cannot find anyone to work for us. Every school and college said we cannot find any jobs for the kids that are in school. So somebody wasn't telling me the truth, so I thought. The problem was actually they just didn't talk to each other. So I've got a plan to get us to 2050. I may or may not be alive by that point. And the reason being is I've got a 2-year-old grandson, and I need to make sure he can have a future on this island. So what we're doing, we've got businesses together, and to the point that the question, what businesses do we want here? We want businesses that require high skill, that pay well, that invest in their employees, and are here for the long term. So anchor to institutions that aren't just here and gone. So things like call centres that just come and disappear, I'm afraid they're not for us. That's not what we want on the island. We've got some of those great businesses already. But there's 2 routes through school. And I might upset some schools in this, and I don't mind if I do, is that we've got 3 T-level students in my office. I'm the only office in the country, MP's office, doing it. And to see the change in those youngsters coming through the door, not saying booze abuse, and now see the change in their confidence, is where all of us, and this is the one request I'm going to make for all of you, and you leave this room, is you do something to help me in this quest. You can either come to my office and help me, or you can just do something to help youngsters. You've got 2 choices at school, and the apprentices we're taking on, when they said I'm not interested in university and school centre, well, there is nothing else. You've got hospital or hospitality, is basically all you can look forward to on the island. That's not good enough, because it's not true. The businesses I told you about are in my area are desperate for people to go into apprenticeships, level 3s, even level 2s for experience, degree apprenticeships. You know, we need to show people the pathways into well-paid work. And we need to do that to say to somebody who's currently 16, 17, 18, how much money do you want to earn by the time you're 26? If they say 40 grand, we can say this is the pathway, this is what you've got to do. Now, I am confident we can do that, because I'm yet to meet someone that tells me that's a bad idea. Please feel free to put your hand and tell me it's a bad idea, because I will stay on way past 9 arguing with you that it's a really good idea. So that's what we need to do. And we do, collaboration is a word, but it's more than that. It's actually sitting down and doing it. And it's not big things, there's no one big thing. This has been, we're 18 months in, I'm way ahead of the Milburn report. I spotted this as on the island as being 50 years ahead. This is sitting down and committing to do small changes. Things like GK have gone from only offering level 3 qualifications to these work to saying, well, let's let people do level 2s with this for the experience. Change a youngster's mind. Now, I'd still get a bit choked. I would do. Really good, sorry, you might have to take over. Really good example. Sorry, I have a young lady went to work at Blackgate Chime and fair to say SEND, and turned up on the first day and they said, "You have the ice cream card?" And she said, I didn't think I was going to get this joke, sorry. She said, I can't speak to people. So they could have said, well, off you go. They didn't, they put her in a Big Bird outfit. In 6 weeks, she lived her best life. Sorry, this is ridiculous. I'm so sorry. Lived her best life, okay? Then in 6 weeks, they said, sorry, it's got to go to the dry cleaners. Thinking she'd leave, and she said, it's fine, because in my head I'm still wearing it. Change for life. And that's what we need to do. I'm so sorry. That's ridiculous.
Thanks, Richard. Jack.
Yeah, I think sort of securing the island's future and making sure it's more prosperous in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more, all comes down to connectivity. And for any rural area, in fact, pretty much any community, whatever the setting, connectivity is absolutely key. Be that connectivity through obvious things like public transport, but also internet connectivity, and that's why government subsidise fibre optic rollout. And plainly, obviously, the most unique connectivity challenge we have is how we connect to the mainland. And unless we can fundamentally find a way of doing that cheaper, more reliably, and more regularly, the island is going to continue to suffer. Because all our challenges, in one way or another, link back to the challenge of connectivity. And being an island is why we're here, but it doesn't mean that we have to unduly suffer the consequences. So we have an older population, which means it's harder to deliver social care with a small unitary authority. But it's harder because there isn't the flexibility of moving people down the road. Down the road means they've got to get on a ferry in order to get to a loved one that's been discharged to Hampshire. We've got a declining school-age population because working families either can't make a living here because there aren't the jobs and the businesses that want to come, or people of that age don't want to move here because the barrier to crossing is so limited. And until we can deliver that more cost-effectively, more reliably, and more regularly, we are always going to struggle. So that's why I will always come back to connectivity. It's not all about crossing the Solent with ferries, but that is a very, very large chunk of it.
Fran, I think there's probably a perception that your two ferry companies sit on the other side of the water, don't really participate in anything other than managing your dynamic pricing. You do, don't you? I know you do. I see you in lots of places, we see you in lots of places. Just tell us what Red Funnel's view is on your role in helping to shape the island in the future.
Yeah, we see ourselves as an essential part of island life. As I said before, we'll never always agree on what the right numbers are, but one thing I will point out is through the summer we have 250 crossings a day between 3 ferry operators. Through the winter that's 150. There is 24/7 connectivity. It doesn't always go necessarily at the time somebody would like. I know for us particularly there's a bit of a gap through midnight till 3 AM. We don't have a lot of demand at that time, I have to say, but alongside that, this is a cyclical piece of work here. We are essential to the island, but you're essential to us. And that whole piece, for us, it is essential that the island thrives. We do a huge amount in the community, and again, I can give you numbers, but there's around £500,000 of direct travel support, funding into local charities, local institutions. We do listen if you've got feedback on things, and Richard, your example, when you first came into office, you came through and you said, what are you doing for job seekers? And we said, well, we have a scheme to help people come off the island to find jobs. And you said, well, why don't you just extend that to people coming onto the island to find jobs? And we've done that, we take the feedback, because we do see our responsibility. We're not regulated, that again, I don't actually think that would be a question for me. But what we do have is we call it the social licence. So when we have our board meetings, and particularly with our new owners, we talk about the social licence and the moral imperative, which is why we run a lot of non-profitable savings. And alongside that, our owner, our principal on the ownership fund, he is Swedish, he's based in Britain, as the fund and the ownership model is, but he's from an island. He spends a lot of time here. He came down last bank holiday, he comes down regularly, he travels as a customer. So he sees and he knows the importance of what we do to the island community. So we have that level of support.
And I guess, Frank, your business model requires you to grow the market.
The market, the island-wide market, and our business plan, it's not a massive growth market, and I think that's where the ferry companies have gone wrong in the past, where they've had previous ownership models and balance sheets that have reflected, the phrase, the big hockey stick. We know that the Isle of Wight is constrained in growth. It doesn't have the housing stock. We know we're not seeing enough housing being built. We want to see growth, but our business model is not predicated on market growth. Our business model is based on trying to increase tourism, trying to get people to travel more frequently.
and it's big time. Don, Fran, Visit Isle of Wight has to persuade island tourist businesses to commit to still paying to promote tourism on the island. How critical is that job? And Fran, how are you in that? How are you signed up in that process?
We're obviously, as the organisational viewpoint, extremely committed to developing tourism on the island. As I said earlier, the main key thing for me moving into this next bid process is around the investment into that and getting the correct cost of money available to shout about all the great things that happen on the island. We've got some really good things going on at the film studio that's going in down the River Medina. That's going to create a job. It's going to have the ability to create screen tourism on the island as well, which is something we've not seen here before. We're doing our bit in terms of going out, talking to businesses, trying to understand how can we change the structure of the levy to better add value to those businesses. We've run a number of different courses on social media, help with reduction in business rates. So we're trying to do everything we can to help businesses grow and develop, but it fundamentally comes back down to the support of those bigger tourism businesses buying into the idea and the vision that we should be selling the Isle of Wight and all the great things it's got out there to a wider market.
There's a vision, isn't there, among tourist businesses on the island, and some of the bigger ones, and they've really got to put their money where their mouth is.
With our new board, we've seen a change of direction in that. We've seen a lot of businesses coming together and volunteering to up their contributions to the pot because they understand the importance of that investment, the return on that investment that can deliver to the island.
And Fran, you're bought into that?
We're signed up. I think it goes back to, I know collaboration is a buzzword, but it goes back to that. For us, it's about working together. And that is working together for the good of the island. The more we can attract, the more we can sell the good points. And I do think sometimes we do ourselves down. When we go out there, whether it's ferries, whether it's roads, whether it's housing, the message has to be, this island is an amazing place. It has its challenges and we're working together to address them. But the first point of that has to be, the island's amazing. Come over here, look at the industries, look at the attractions, look at the scenery. There's so much to love about it. Let's not forget that.
Thank you, Fran. I would say those are great words to close on, but I've got a gentleman over here who's been waiting quite a while, so we're going to take your question, but we're going to take it quickly. Sorry, can you just start again on the mic, thanks.
I'm Christopher, I'm the chairman of Community Cuppa, which is a non-profit charity ride. There's 2 questions I want to ask you. When are you going to make these roads more safer? Because everywhere you see there's potholes in the road, and also there's people crossing the road down residential streets, there's people speeding. When are you going to be putting speed cameras down residential roads to stop people getting killed on the island roads?
Simon, it's a new topic, isn't it, Simon?
So, the specifics of the location I'm happy to look at, and obviously as I've only come into the role recently, I recently met with the police chief of the island, and I know, sort of speaking to him around ensuring that the roads policing unit there's a greater focus on speed enforcement and the general sort of approach to enforcing sort of road safety and traffic violations, and I think that certainly my officers in the council are keen to continue to support that in terms of reducing casualties and making the roads on the island a safer place. Obviously, I opened the debate at the question 1 around the issue of potholes, and obviously, I'm happy to look at specific concerns the residents got, but I have to just restate the island's road asset is in really good condition, and yes, if there are isolated cases, I'm happy to look at that and why they're not being addressed. But overall, our road condition, as I've said earlier on, is very good in comparison to a lot of the local authorities across the UK, and that's something that I think is a positive for us.
Thanks, Simon. I know, from my own experience over the last 3 or 4 weeks, Simon's been refreshingly available, happy to be harangued on email and face to face, so I'm sure you can put yourself in touch with Simon while he's there. But I think we've had a really good debate tonight. We've had some disagreements, which I think is really good. Thank you, all of you, for coming. Thank you to the panellists. It's a great way for them to spend their Friday night, I'm sure we'll be back again in a year's time. Thank you to the Echo, thank you to the Observer. Let's just remember those positive words though. We can talk ourselves down, we can talk this island down. Ultimately, the future of the island lies in our hands. And if we don't drive the island forward, no one else is going to do it for us. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, just before you go, we'd like to thank you. Thank you for attending. We hope you found this year's Island Debate useful and interesting and generally of great interest to yourselves as well as others. We hope you've enjoyed the live streaming, which you can replay on any of the social media channels. But before we close, I'd like to offer our sincere thanks to our panel. They've given up their time this evening to answer your questions directly, and I'm sure you'll be grateful for the openness of the engagement they've given. Please give a round of applause to this panel. I'd also like to thank our chairman, Mr. Mark Morgan-Hughes, over there for guiding the discussion so skillfully. Please do show your appreciation for Mark. First of all, of course, we're also grateful for the hosts here at All Saints Church. I'm sure that you'll agree the building looks magnificent following the recent upgrades, and we're delighted to have been welcomed so warmly by them. But before you leave, please take a moment to complete your feedback forms and drop them into the blue boxes by the exits. There's two boxes over there, one on the left and one on the right. And if you have any further thoughts that you think that would make next year's debate even more interesting or better, please jot something down and give that either to one of our representatives or pop it into the box also. I'd also like to thank you for being such engaged and thoughtful audience. Your questions and your presence are what makes this event matter. So thank you very much. If you'll indulge me for just one more moment, I'd like to say a few words about the Daisy Ring Bus, of which I personally one of the directors. Thank you for any of the donations that you've given us tonight. We are a complete set of volunteers. We've got volunteer drivers, we've got everybody volunteers. Nobody takes a penny out of it. And every penny that you put into the pot goes to make the wheels of the bus keep turning. So thank you very much for your donations. I hope you feel able to support us tonight and with a small donation put into our collection bucket out there, or even a large one, it's entirely up to you. That just leaves us to wish you all a very safe journey home, and thank you once again. Thank you very much.